Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 12%. Chapter 41. Killing the traffickers, changing the farm, 1/4. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The three were fast, and they didn't run very far. I saw Mikasa running in a panic in the woods. Brook, the scarred face at the front, looked at Mikasa's delicate face with a greedy gleam in his eyes. They came to this generation this time because of Mikasa's mother. The ancestry and face of the Oriental people are very popular in the black market of Wengdu Underground Street. After waiting for several days, they finally found their chance. But during the arrest just now, the tall and thin man shot and killed the woman because he was too nervous. However, fortunately, he killed a woman and met a little girl. Their loss is not too great. Run, why don't you run away? Damn, I'm exhausted. The three stopped panting and looked at Mikasa, who was tripped and fell to the ground. Scarface Brook grabbed Mikasa's neck with one hand and lifted Mikasa up. He was panting and cursing. The vicious eyes seemed to eat the little girl with dull eyes in front of him. Cough cough cough. Mikasa stared blankly. In her mind, the image of her parents being chopped into pieces by the man in front of her kept replaying in her mind. The big hands like iron hoops around her neck squeezed her so hard that she couldn't breathe. She felt cold all over, and the world lost its luster. Advertisement. Am I going to die? Can I see my parents when I die? Facing death, Mikasa felt no fear. The death of her parents left her no desire to live on. She closed her eyes, her mind was full of memories of her parents. The warmth of a family of three. But now, all of this has disappeared on this dark rainy night. Tuck tuck. On the dense horseshoes, there was a sound, getting closer. Go and see. Scarface Brook, throwing Mikasa on the ground. The sudden sound of hooves made him a little uneasy. Brook kicked the tall and thin man next to him holding a shotgun, motioning for the man to check the situation. The tall and thin man held the gun tightly and walked in the direction of the sound of horseshoes in the distance. He had his hand on the trigger, ready to fire it at any moment. Brook held Mikasa in one hand and dragged the long knife that had just chopped off Mikasa's parents with the other, and followed behind his two men. His fierce eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. Boom. The tall and thin man with the gun flew back upside down not long after he walked out. His body in midair was bow-shaped, twisting exaggeratedly. It hit a tree, and several trees were broken by the tall and thin man. Pooh. The tall and thin man spat out a mouthful of blood with his mouth open, and his pupils were slowly dilated. Lin Yan appeared in front of everyone. Advertisement. He slowly withdrew his right leg that he had kicked out, and Lin Yan didn't hold back the slightest force from that kick just now. Who are you and why did you hurt my companion? The burly Brook watched Lin Yan walk towards them, and he threw the Mikasa in his hand on the ground. The long-bladed knife in his hand began to charge secretly. The one who wants your life. Lin Yan stood where he was, without any emotion in his words. He quietly looked at Brook, who was like a small titan, and clenched his fists. He had just seen the mutilated bodies of Mikasa's parents all over the floor. Although he had only spent a few hours with Mikasa's parents. But the kindness exuded by the husband and wife was enough for Lin Yan to make a move for them. Human traffickers, no matter in the previous life or in this life, Lin Yan hates them extremely. What an arrogant boy. When Brook heard Lin Yan's words, he was furious immediately. His veins bulged, and he swung the long knife that had already been charged at Lin Yan forcefully. Although the long knife has been curled, it still shines coldly. Blessed with Brook's great strength, the blade brought up a storm and slashed towards Lin Yan's neck. Click. Lin Yan dodged sideways the moment the giant knife slashed at him. The giant knife struck the small tree next to Lin Yan, and the small tree was split in two by the knife. Brook cut through the air with one blow, and he couldn't help but staggered. Before he could stand still, a figure approached his side. Lin Yan's fist magnified in Brook's eyes. Before the fist arrived, the wind of the fist had already made his eyes close. Boom. With just one punch, Brook's eyes and head were blown apart. Red flesh like a watermelon spread out. Advertisement. His head was torn off from his neck by a huge force because of the force it received, and rolled out like a broken leather ball. Do not kill me. On one side was the short man who would have been immobilized by Lin Yan's movements for a long time. The body reeks of urine. Bang. With a flash of a knife in Lin Yan's hand, the little one was instantly split in half by Lin Yan. The blood was gone in a flash, and two pieces of flesh fell to the ground drooping. In just a moment, the three who were arrogant just now were completely dead. 10 days later, north of Sheena's wall. In some farmlands, finger-high shoots have emerged from the crops planted by farmers. Some industrious farmers are cleaning the weeds that grow together with the farmers in the fields. In the crop field in the Hunter Group farm, the crops are growing well. Separated by a fence from the one on the other side, the crops on the side of the Hunter Group's farm are average. How is this possible? The crops of these boys are so strong. What's the use of being strong? If the output can't increase, it's still nonsense. Several old farmers stood by the fence. Looking at the thriving crops in Lin Yan's farm, I can't believe it. Before, a group of them felt that the half-sized boys of the Hunter Group were wasting their energy. But after only 1 month, they discovered that the crops in the hunter group's field grew much better than theirs. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report 2. 12%. Chapter 42. Warm Daily with Mikasa 2 quarters. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. There are 2 or 3 white clouds in the sky, a rare sunny day. In the hunter group farm. A group of young and strong teenagers were busy on the farm. Behind the 3 rows of neatly painted white painted wooden houses, a new workshop is being built. From a distance, the workshop has been half built, and it looks like a large construction site at this moment. Levi, Fran, the warrior turned woodworker, helps out. Although the sun in the sky makes people a little uncomfortable. But the busy people enjoyed the roast very much. The teenagers were sweating and laughing happily. The whole farm is full of vitality. The workshops and white wooden houses are surrounded by crop fields. The lush crops are swaying with the wind under the breeze, looking as far as the eye can see, like a blue ocean. The unique fragrance of plants in the air is refreshing. A petite black-haired girl, hugging her knees, sat on the field ridge. Her short black hair was blown by the breeze. On her delicate and fair face, her big eyes were as bright as lacquer, filled with mist. A pair of willow leaf eyebrows were tightly frowned. The little girl is Mikasa, who was brought back to the hunter's farm by Lin Yan. Both her parents died and she had no one to turn to, so Lin Yan had to bring her back. Mikasa was sitting on the ridge of the field. She lowered her head and looked at the busy ants in the field with dull eyes. Although more than 10 days had passed since that terrible rainy night, she was still awakened by nightmares every day. The image of Brooke slashing at her parents with a machete is still etched in Mikasa's mind. Advertisement. Give. A deliciously browned bread with a strong aroma. And a slender hand appeared in Mikasa's vision. Mikasa raised his head slowly, and there was a tough profile in his eyes. A tall, black-haired boy with a cool and handsome aura sat beside her. Thanks. Mikasa took the bread and slowly broke it open. Little by little stuffed into the small mouth. She moves very slowly, very slowly. Lin Yan looked at the silent Mikasa next to him, he felt a little headache. Since he brought Mikasa back from the south, for 10 days, Mikasa only talked to himself. No matter who it was, Mikasa ignored him. Every day I just sit on the ridge in a daze. If you want to cry, just cry. Hearing Lin Yan's words, Mikasa's petite body couldn't help trembling with the bread in her hand. Tears were streaming down her eyes, which were already filled with mist. Woo woo woo. Mikasa hugged Lin Yan's arm and wept helplessly in a low voice, and her crying became louder and louder. From the initial sobbing to howling. The death of her parents was a huge blow to the young Mikasa. When she was young, the whole world collapsed at that moment. It also made Mikasa completely disappointed in this world. After Mikasa's parents died, she no longer had any relatives. She is like a firefly wandering alone in the dark. Swallowed by darkness, annihilated. Advertisement. Even life seems to have lost its meaning. Can I call you big brother from now on? After crying for a long time, Mikasa raised her head and looked at Lin Yan expectantly. The sadness that has been pent up in Mikasa's heart for many days. It seemed that because of the crying, it dissipated a little, and there was a gleam of light in her dark eyes. For Lin Yan, Mikasa has an inexplicable sense of dependence. Lin Yan not only helped her take care of her parents' funeral affairs, and helped her kill her enemies. So in this world, if there is anyone she cares about, then only Lin Yan is left. However, after Mikasa came to the north, he saw that Lin Yan had such a huge power. After owning such a large farm, she hesitated, who always wanted to call Lin Yan big brother. She is just a child of a peasant family, no matter how much she dares to ask for, she can call Lin Yan a big brother. In her opinion, this is a somewhat extravagant and even excessive request. Okay, Lin Yan nodded, he was more or less regretful that he could not save Mikasa's parents. The development of the plot still deviates from the original route. Instead of meeting Mikasa, Eren became him. This made Lin Yan a little annoyed, which meant that some unforeseen circumstances might happen later. Thank you, big brother. Hearing Lin Yan's response, Mikasa showed a hint of surprise on his anxious face. Then he started crying again, but unlike before, the crying at this time was not as full of grief as before. Holding Lin Yan's arm tightly, Mikasa was crying, her restless and anxious heart became calm. She seems to have returned to her warm home, everything is still the same as before, quiet and warm. The warm spring breeze blows the earth. Advertisement. Tired of crying, Mikasa hugged Lin Yan's arm tightly and fell asleep. On Mikasa's delicate white face, the willow-like brows stretched out, looking quiet and sweet. Finally recovered, Lin Yan looked at the sleeping Mikasa, and heaved a sigh of relief. For the past 10 days, Mikasa has been half dead. Lin Yan wondered if she could survive. Now that Mikasa has recovered, she can also start training with the hunter group. Mikasa's combat talent is still very strong, although not as perverted as Levi, but in terms of talent. Mikasa, who has the blood of the Ackerman family, can also be ranked second in his hunter group. Lin Yan doesn't raise trash, he adopted Mikasa, not because he wanted to be a good person, Instead, he took a fancy to her fighting talent. Since Lin Yan added points to his physique to 8, his appetite has also become enormous. Far beyond ordinary people. In the past, Lin Yan could only eat one person's food in a meal. So now he needs at least the food intake of 8 ordinary adults to feel full. Lin Yan didn't dare to imagine how amazing his appetite would be when he arrived. Therefore, in order to obtain a large amount of food, Lin Yan must manage his hunter group well. Only in this way can the hunter group continue to make money and provide him with food. In this world, force is essential to protect one's own food. Therefore, the hunter group was divided into 2 parts. Some are mainly engaged in daily operations, such as farming, running workshops, and the business of hunter groups. The other part is dedicated to fighting to protect the industrial safety of the hunter group. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 12%. Chapter 43. Kindness is original sin. Lin Yan takes action 3/4. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Time flies. A month later, inside the huge manor next to the hunter group farm. The whole manor is pink, and the air of the manor is filled with the faint fragrance of cherry blossoms. A blue butterfly fluttered slowly on the branch of the cherry tree. It flaps its wings gracefully to avoid the oncoming pink petals blown down by the wind. The blue wings of the butterfly are shining in the eyes, in the rain of pink petals. Extra dazzling. Swish. A net draws an arc in the sky, and the butterfly is instantly caught in the net. It flapped its blue wings, but to no avail. Haha, I caught it. Tear off half of its wings and see how it flies. By the fence of the manor, 2 dirty boys holding a net bag, looking at the struggling blue butterflies in the net bag. Smiling excitedly, one of them, a stocky boy with a snotty nose, reached out and took out a blue butterfly. He laughed when he heard his partner speak, and was about to tear off a wing of the blue butterfly in front of him. Can you give me the butterfly? I'll exchange this sweet potato. Just when the snot-nosed boy was about to tear off the butterfly's wings. Advertisement. A crisp voice came from a distance. The little boy wiped his snot on the back of his hand and stared at the blonde girl walking in the distance. Looking at the girl in front of her who is clean, her hair is neatly combed, and she exudes a noble temperament. The boy looked at the mud all over his body again, feeling jealous in his heart. Krista, pass the sweet potatoes. The boy with a snotty nose held the butterfly and quickly ran to Krista. He stretched out his muddy hand, and his tone was beyond doubt. But butterfly, can you give me the butterfly? That's beautiful, haha, idiot, the sweet potato is mine, and the butterfly is also mine. The boy snatched the sweet potato from Krista's hand, and looked at Krista viciously, his face full of complacency. He sniffed the snot hanging on his nose, then looked at Krista fiercely and threatened. If you dare to tell that black-haired man what happened today, I'll kill you, hear you. After threatening Krista, the boy was ready to leave triumphantly with the sweet potato in his arms. Krista fell to the ground when the boy grabbed the sweet potato. There was mist in her eyes, and she was about to cry, but she held back. Call out. Sudden. A rope loop flew over from a distance, and it was precisely wrapped around the boy's neck. Immediately, the rope on the rope circle was straightened instantly, and the boy was pulled up by the rope around his neck. Like a fish with a fat head that was caught, it was lifted into the air in an instant. Cough cough cough. Advertisement. The burly boy in midair was strangled, and his face instantly turned purple. His eyes were wide open, the sweet potato and the butterfly net bag in his hand fell to the ground, his feet fluttered in a panic. Facing the direction of the rope, the boy saw a black-haired boy riding on a strong and handsome horse. Holding a harness in his hand, he looked at him calmly. A sense of suffocation swept through his body. The boy looked at the black-haired boy beggingly, and he recognized that the boy was the owner of the farm next door. Please, please, let. Lin Yan effortlessly held the harness pole in his hand with one hand, not paying attention to the boy's pale face. And the boy's begging eyes. He looked at Krista who was pushed to the ground by the boy, and said lightly. You didn't come to my horse on time today. Don't be late next time. Krista looked at Lin Yan on the horse in surprise. She quickly got up from the ground, her little face was full of guilt. Because I often go to the library of Lin Yan farm to read books, as a price. Krista helps Lin Yan feed the horses every day. She was late today because she wanted to switch from a boy to a butterfly. Sorry, big brother, I won't be late in the future. Can you, let Doclan go? Through the fence. Krista looked at the violently struggling boy who was suspended in the air by Lin Yan's harness. There was a trace of unbearable in his eyes. Thump. Advertisement. Hearing Krista's words, Lin Yan flicked the harness in his hand. The boy with a fat head like a fish was thrown by Lin Yan over the fence and fell into the pond in the manor. It hit the water with a loud splash. Quack quack. The water in the pond was splashed and splashed. A few white geese in the pond were frightened by the sudden splash of water, flapping their wings and running away quickly. Suddenly fell into the water. The strong Doclan was directly inserted into the mud, struggling to pull his head out of the mud, and he choked up several times of muddy water. Doclan, whose face was full of mud, looked at Lin Yan who was riding on horseback and retracting the rope from a distance. The fear in his eyes turned into tears. Not daring to make a sound. It seems that the other party will not tolerate him just because he is a child. Krista, blindly forbearance will only make things worse. Lin Yan looked at Krista and shook her head, and retracted the rope around the little boy's neck. After leaving a word, he rode away on horseback. Krista is the same as the original book, still the kind girl who is a bit too kind. Even if she was bullied like this, she still didn't hate the boy who bullied her. But, looking at Lin Yan's straight back, Krista's big blue eyes with blonde hair were full of gratitude. Although Lin Yan usually doesn't pay much attention to her appearance. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 13%. Chapter 44. Workshop changes, Mikasa's stubbornness 4 quarters. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. But every time she goes to feed Lin Yan's horses, Lin Yan will leave some delicious food for her. Sometimes it's beautiful pastries, sometimes it's sweets she's never had. So although feeding horses is hard work for her, she never tires of it. Rely on their own labor in exchange for the right to food. This made Krista very happy. And in her family manner, she not only has to face the disgusting eyes of her mother and grandmother every day. Also often bullied. What's more, they only eat sweet potatoes every day. So whenever she has time, she runs to Lin Yan's farm. Don't get caught next time. Run to the net bag that fell on the ground. Krista carefully opened the net bag, and took out the blue butterfly inside with her white hands. Watching the blue butterfly slowly fly up and disappear into the sky full of cherry blossoms. Krista showed an angelic smile. Immediately, Krista stepped over the fence and chased after Lin Yan where he disappeared. Inside the Hunter Group farm. Compared with a month ago, there is a big difference. Before, only a part of the workshop was built, but it has been completely completed. Seen from a height, a row of orange-red wooden houses has been added to the farm where there were only 3 rows of white wooden houses before. This is the workshop of the Hunter Group. White steam exudes from the chimney of the orange-red wooden house. People kept coming in and out of the cabin. Bring in some supplies. Advertisement. Or lift out some wooden boxes. In front of the orange house in the workshop, a neat row of carriages parked in the middle of the open space in the yard. After the carriage was unloaded by the workshop boys, it was quickly filled with goods and left the farm. A month's time, the Hunter Group not only built a farm, but also resumed the production of the workshop. Near the workshop, under a big tree covered with moss, Mikasa, drenched in sweat, stood on a small stool, stood on tiptoe trembling, and pulled towards the rope above his head. Her delicate fair little face looked a little pale. The forehead was covered with dense beads of sweat. At the other end of the rope is a big black bell. Mikasa, who can usually easily pull the rope. Mikasa was already sore and limp from training all morning. The rope that could have been easily grasped is now very difficult. Enough several times have not been able to reach. Even though Mikasa was so sore all over, it was difficult to even stand upright. But stubborn, she still refused to give up, grabbing the rope in midair again and again. The small stool was shaking, and the amplitude was getting bigger and bigger. Mikasa, who was sore all over his body, slipped and was about to fall off the bench. Suddenly, Mikasa felt her collar being grabbed, and she was lifted to the ground by a gentle force. This time, she discovered that at some point, Lin Yan had come to her. Mikasa, who was still in shock, felt the safety brought by the earth again, and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If Lin Yan hadn't appeared, she would have fallen to the ground. Advertisement. Thank you, big brother. Mikasa looked up at Lin Yan's calm and tough face, and said thank you sweetly. Is it that tall? Touching Mikasa's head, Lin Yan compared his height. Then leave quickly. After a while Lin Yan appeared in front of Mikasa again. Another length was attached to the rope under the bell. Mikasa looked at the rope that she could easily grab in her hand, and looked at Lin Yan, her heart was filled with warmth. Dang dang dang. As the iron bell was rang by Mikasa, everyone who was busy in the whole farm put down their work. It's time to eat. People began to gather in the cafeteria. After joining the Hunter Group, Mikasa started her daily hard training life. In addition, she also took on the task of ringing the bell in the farm. Responsible for ringing the bell at mealtime. The canteen of the Hunter Group is inside a yellow wooden house. The canteen is located between the living area of the white wooden house and the working area of the orange wooden house. 10 minutes later, the cafeteria was already full of people who came to eat, and at a glance, there were no empty seats, neatly. Although there were many people, no one spoke, and everyone waited quietly. Swish. Seeing a tall figure slowly coming in at the door, everyone looked over in unison. Their eyes are full of reverence and fanaticism. Advertisement. The figure was Lin Yan, who came in from the outside. Okay. Lin Yan scanned the crowd and nodded slightly when he saw the orderly and uncluttered cafeteria. Everyone in the Hunter Group straightened their backs. Feeling the glance of Lin Yan's eyes without the slightest emotion. Everyone in the Hunter Group felt tremendous pressure. Just standing there, Lin Yan had a majestic majesty that made everyone unable to look directly at him. Lin Yan, who was sitting in his seat and started eating, hummed. Everyone felt light all over in an instant, as if a boulder had been removed from their hearts. Then they started eating. Lin Yan took the main seat. The table in front of me was covered with food. He cut a piece of beef, inserted it with a fork, put it in his mouth, and chewed slowly. Ding! Congratulations to the host, the point increase progress has reached 100%, points plus 1 inch. Hearing the system's notification tone, Lin Yan was a little surprised. It has only been a little over a month since the last point increase. But he heard the system beep again. In contrast, the increase in points is much faster than before. Previously, it took an average of 2.5 months to increase 1 point. Now, in more than a month, 1 point has been added again. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 13%. Chapter 45. Actual combat training. Levi who wants to kill Titan 1/4. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Lin Yan opened the system panel. System panel. Host. Lin Yan. Current world. Attack on Titan. Physique. 6-meter level unscaled Titan level. Points. 1-0. Skills. Fighting LV6, Forging LV5, 3-dimensional mobile device manipulation LV1, Brewing LV2, Cooking LV1. Seeing one more point on the system panel, Lin Yan thought for a while, and added the point to his physique. Ding! Congratulations to the host, the physique point has reached 9, and the physique has reached the level of a 6.5-meter Wiskel Titan. As the system sounded, Lin Yan felt warm all over his body. He could feel that the sense of power in his body became stronger again. The heartbeat became stronger and stronger, pumping blood vigorously. Lung breathing is longer. The skin is more resilient. Muscles become firmer. The most obvious is the stomach. Lin Yan could feel his stomach wriggling like an oven. It seems to have become a pulverizer. After a while, Lin Yan, who just ate a large piece of beef, disappeared without a trace. A strong sense of hunger came from his body. For the beef, 10 caddies first. Advertisement. Hearing Lin Yan's words, Isabel is in charge of Lin Yan's usual diet. He quickly walked into the kitchen and served Lin Yan a pot of beef. Seeing that Lin Yan quickly finished all the meat on the plate, Levi was not at all surprised. He grew up with Lin Yan since he was a child, and he knew from a long time ago that Lin Yan is a big eater. Every time I eat, I have to eat several times more than him. But the habitual look on Levi's face lasted for a short time. Boss's appetite seems to have increased again. 10 minutes later, Levi looked at the wooden tubs piled up in front of Lin Yan that were specially used to hold meat. Even he, who was used to Lin Yan's big appetite, couldn't help being surprised. A full 100 caddies of beef was eaten by Lin Yan just like that. Moreover, Lin Yan ate not only beef, but also a large amount of bread, sweet potatoes, and a large bucket of milk. And dozens of apples. Could this be the secret of the boss becoming stronger? Levi has been training hard all these years. But every time he competed with Lin Yan, he ended in failure. Seeing that Lin Yan was still eating at a leisurely pace, Levi was always interested in how Lin Yan became stronger. There was a flash of light in my mind, as if I had a clear understanding. Cuckoo. Levi, who was already full, picked up a small half bucket of milk and drank it. Deputy head, this is. In the cafeteria, everyone was stunned by Lin Yan's appetite and opened their mouths wide. Suddenly Levi was seen lifting the milk and guzzling. Seeing Levi's low body, his stomach is obviously bulging slowly. A light flashed in his mind. Advertisement. The strongest hunter group is the leader Lin Yan. Next is Levi. They all eat so much, so. Give me another meal. I also want. Give me one too. ... In the cafeteria, Isabel, who is in charge of food supply, watched the people who kept gathering to eat. She looked at Lin Yan who was still eating. Isabel suddenly thought. Lin Yan misled everyone. But she didn't say much. Instruct the person in charge of the cafeteria to bring out the spare food for everyone. ... The next day. Noon. The sun in the sky is scorching the earth, and there is no cloud in sight. The temperature is rising sharply. The air was slightly distorted by the high temperature, and the leaves of the plants on the ground were curled under the scorching sun. Squeak. In a huge forest, a cicada screamed tirelessly from a tree. Break. Break. ... Suddenly, in the silent forest, the sound of steel cables passing through metal sounded. As steel cables shot out from the woods, the cicada on the tree was instantly pierced by one of the steel cables. Advertisement. Immediately afterwards, a group of teenagers wearing 3-dimensional mobile devices appeared under the blue sky. Quickly passing through this forest lined with giant trees. Click click click. Levi, Isabel, and Fran, who were leading the crowd, cut staggeringly with the steel knives in their hands. Cut the sandbags on the back necks of the Titan models on their way in turn. The movements of the three were done in one go, extremely fluent. Well done. Lin Yan stood at the finish line, holding a timer he modified himself. He nodded slightly to the three who arrived at the finish line first. Since Lin Yan returned from the last battle with the Titan, Lin Yan began to lead the hunter group to conduct actual combat simulation training. Now everyone has made great progress. In fact, when Lin Yan recruited members of the Hunter group, one of the assessment criteria was balanceability. The 50 fighters in the Hunter group were all specially selected. Therefore, it is much faster than ordinary people to use three-dimensional mobile devices. Hearing Lin Yan's praise, Levi, Fran and Isabel were all a little excited. Levi, whose childishness had dissipated, looked at Lin Yan expectantly and asked, "Boss, when are we going to take a look outside?" The last time Lin Yan killed all directions on the southern border, and even killed a strange species, it spread to almost every region. Others don't know who the black-haired boy is, but they do. This greatly increased Levi's interest in hunting the Titan, who already admired Lin Yan. So Levi has always hoped to go out with Lin Yan to kill Titan. When are you waiting? You can travel in the dark without hindrance. Suppress the simulation time to 1 minute. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 13%. Chapter 46. Poisoning, Krista's Courage 2 quarters. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hearing Lin Yan's words, the three of them let out a sigh of relief. Among the three of them, Levi is the fastest to cross this area. The best score also took 3 minutes. Both Fran and Isabel hovered above 4 minutes. Because a gas replenishment machine was successfully obtained in the farm. The three-dimensional mobile device training of the three was almost day and night. But after thousands of attempts, the three of Levi realized how difficult it is to compress the time. For every second of compression, they have to pay dozens of efforts. Boss, don't go back on your word. Levi quickly replenished the gas, then he pulled the catapult and rushed out first. He believes that within a minute, he can do it too. Although Lin Yan's fastest record is 40 seconds. Soon Isabel and Fran rushed out, also full of fighting spirit. 40 seconds is my limit. Looking at the three people who disappeared into the woods, Lin Yan smiled faintly, and gave a negative answer in his heart. May. After entering May, the weather gets hotter and hotter. The spring wheat planted in spring is already waist deep, and some of them have begun to ear. The wheat in the Hunter Group farm looks stronger than the wheat in other surrounding farmlands. Advertisement. Some have begun to grout. The ears of wheat become gradually fuller and tighter. The wheat plants, which were originally straight, gradually tilted slightly because of the gradually heavier ears of wheat. How is this possible? How did they do it? Why don't we ask for advice? Next year we will plant like them. Outside the fence of the Hunter Group's farm, there were a few old farmers who had been disdainful and suspicious of the planting methods of the Hunter Group. Looking at the well-growing wheat in Lin Yan's farm, I am amazed. A few people really can't figure it out. They have waited for others to plant the land all their lives. Why on earth did he lose to a group of brats? After they couldn't find the answer, several people decided to ask for advice. As long as you can get a bigger harvest, the so-called face is not worth mentioning. Beside the wheat field, two furtive figures slipped through a hole in the fence. Docklin, what if we get caught? I saw that black-haired man in the morning, riding out on horseback. We injected the drug and ran away. In the wheat field, two boys moved on the ridge. They quickly approached a corner of the Hunter Group and sneaked towards the stables. Dockling holds a packet of rat poison in his hand. He remembered that a few days ago, he was almost strangled to death by Lin Yan with a horse pole, and the light of hatred flashed in his eyes. Take courage and start sprinkling medicine. What are you doing? What's in your hand? Advertisement. Just as Docklin was spraying the medicine, Krista, who had read a book at noon in the Hunter Group, returned to the stable. It is also part of her job not to clean up the hay in the stables. The sudden sound made Docklin startled. But when he saw that Krista was coming, he breathed a sigh of relief, and then showed a fierce expression. Pulled out the dagger from his waist and rushed towards Krista. Docklin knew that if Lin Yan knew about this, he would be dead. He still remembers that man's expressionless gaze. If it weren't for him because he proved to so many children that he was bold and fearless, he probably will never enter Lin Yan's farm again. So after being discovered, Docklin had only one thought in mind, and that was to shut Krista up. Do you want to tell that black-haired devil again? If you tell what happened today, then you are dead. The dagger in Docklin's hand was waving towards Krista indiscriminately. While waving the dagger, he began to threaten Krista. Krista looked at Docklin who was waving a dagger at her, and she thought of Lin Yan's words. Blindly giving in will only make things worse. Who you just said is a devil. Also, how did you get in here? Just when Krista was cornered by Docklin holding a dagger. A cold voice sounded. Follow the direction of the sound. Advertisement. Docklin saw a little girl with black hair, drenched in sweat, with a weary face. Sister Mikasa, they cast poison in the stables. Krista finally mustered up her courage, and she yelled at Mikasa. Although she didn't meet Mikasa much. But I was deeply impressed by this girl who worked hard to run around the Hunter Group's farm every day. Today, don't leave. Hearing Krista's words, Mikasa's eyes filled with murderous intent. She has long regarded Lin Yan as her family and Hunter Farm as her home. But the two people in front of them dared to run over to throw poison. Forcibly dragging the body that has been overdrawn after a day of training. Mikasa tightly held the dagger in her hand, her eyes fixed on the little fat man who was much taller than her. Go away. Doclan was dumbfounded when he heard Krista's words. Thinking of Lin Yan's cold eyes, he regretted it very much at this moment. There was only one thought left in his mind, and that was to run. Looking at the thin Mikasa standing in front of him, his heart skipped a beat. He held the dagger and stabbed towards Mikasa. Krista watched as Doclan stabbed Mikasa with a dagger. Her mind went blank. I closed my eyes in fright. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report 3. 13%. Chapter 47. Hack and Kill, Mikasa's desire to protect 3/4. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. PFF'd. Mikasa just wanted to let go, but suddenly her head sank and her eyes went black. While dodging hastily, he was slashed by the dagger of Doclan, who rushed over. The blocking arm was scratched, and blood fell instantly. Go away, you go away for me. Doclan watched his accomplice running far away, and he wanted to ride Mikasa down to the ground and start running too. As a result, as soon as he took a step, Mikasa hugged one foot and fell to the ground in an instant. Anxious, he picked up the knife and stabbed at Mikasa. Boom. Just when Doclan was about to stab Mikasa with a dagger, he felt a buzzing in his head, and after the severe dizziness passed, his head became hot, and bright red blood flowed down from the back of his head. Doclan turned his head and saw that Krista, who had been trembling with fear, was actually holding a stone. If you don't stop, I will smash you to death. Krista looked at Doclan, who turned to look at her. The stone in her hand trembled a little. Krista mustered up her courage, raised the stone, and threatened Doclan weakly. Although she was trembling all over, she didn't mean to retreat at all. You guys are lucky. Doclan covered his head, kicked off Mikasa, who was holding his leg, and ran towards the fence. But before he ran far, he just stood there in a daze. A tall man, mounted on a horse, clutching his fleeing companion with one hand. Advertisement. Lin Yan got off the horse and threw the little kid in his hand to the ground. Then he walked to Mikasa and Krista's side. Lin Yan took out a roll of gauze from the pouch on his waist and slowly wrapped Mikasa's arm. You are young, but you are capable. Fran, give them a ride. Lin Yan looked at the two men who were scared to piss, and said a word lightly. Immediately pick up Mikasa and leave with Krista. Hearing Lin Yan's words, Fran understood. Although Lin Yan's tone is very flat, Fran has been Lin Yan's subordinate for many years. He still heard the faint anger hidden in Lin Yan's words. Under the setting sun, Fran with blonde hair lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. Watching Lin Yan leave with Mikasa and Krista, he was completely invisible. He didn't pay any attention to the pleading in the eyes of the two children in front of him. Pooh, puff. He swung the knife in his hand without hesitation. Along with the bloody arc, two heads fell to the ground. Some devils are already devils when they are very young. Evening. The sun in the west lost the glare of the day, and radiated soft golden light. Advertisement. The original green crops in the crop field were also dyed golden, which looked like gold was inlaid around the jade. The unique fragrance of wheat in the air spreads in all directions with the breeze. A tall and straight boy was walking on the field ridge with a little girl on his back. His shadow was drawn long by the setting sun. The little black-haired girl quietly nestled on the boy's back, like a curled-up kitten. Lin Yan walked steadily on the field ridge towards the pharmacy with Mikasa on his back. Krista has been sent home by him. Why don't you call someone? Turning his head to look at Mikasa lying on his shoulder, Lin Yan spoke softly. The training volume of the hunter group has always been extremely heavy. Generally, after training, very few newcomers can stand up and walk down. Mikasa was the hardest one in training again. So Lin Yan knew why Mikasa didn't beat the poison child just by thinking about it. I want to give it a try and do something for Big Brother. Mikasa's face was pale and her voice was hoarse. She answered Lin Yan's question in a low voice. Today's training consumed too much energy of Mikasa. During the confrontation with the boy, she kept supporting herself. Hearing Mikasa's words, Lin Yan paused slightly. In Mikasa's words, Lin Yan felt a strong desire to protect, which belonged to Mikasa's stubbornness. In the castle, Krista returned to her room with dull eyes. Along the way, she met many servants, but no one asked her where she had gone or why there were mud spots on her clothes. Advertisement. Since birth, Krista has been a transparent person in this manner. Her grandmother and mother would visit her when they thought of her. Usually never ask her anything. This is also the fundamental reason why she was able to run out of the manor frequently, but no one found out. She is a transparent person. Is it sweet potato again? Krista looked at the cold sweet potatoes in her room with deep disappointment. In the manor, her grandfather raised several horses, and the food they ate included beans and eggs. And she only had sweet potatoes to eat. It would be great if I were like Sister Mikasa. Lie down by the window. Looking at the brightly lit hunter farm in the distance, Krista couldn't help but envy Mikasa. Mikasa's strength during the day and Lin Yan's subtle protection made her envious. If I join the training group, can't I be like Sister Mikasa? Suddenly an idea flashed in Krista's mind, and then she strengthened her own idea. Blind compromise will make things worse. Lin Yan's words echoed in Krista's mind again. Krista recalled all the bullying by everyone in the past, and remembered what happened today. Her originally weak eyes became a little different. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 14%. Chapter 48. Assassination, Kenny the Throat Cutter, 4 quarters. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. 3 months later. In the night, there is no shadow of the moon in the sky, only stars all over the sky. A moth flapped its wings vigorously and flew towards a bright spot. In the dark and dim valley, a carriage was parked on the side of the road, a smoky kerosene lamp was hung on the carriage, and a moth swooped from the night sky. Click. The yellow light flickered away, and the moth flying towards the kerosene lamp was instantly cut in half. The moth's corpse slowly slid down in the blue smoke, and under the faint light of the kerosene lamp, it looked like 2 halves of broken leaves. Rista, another accidental product. A eagle-eyed man with the vicissitudes of life was half leaning on the carriage. He held a cigarette in his calloused left hand. In his right hand, he held a piece of yellowed paper. There was an address on the paper, plus a name, and little dots of gray-silver phosphorescence. The dots are clumps of fine moth hairs. The man's name is Kenny Ackerman. Uncle of Levi Ackerman, currently the captain of the suppression unit of the Central Military Police Regiment. In the early years, Kenny Ackerman also had a title, Kenny the Throat Cutter, because he was fighting against the Central Military Police Regiment. There are countless outlaws who died at his hands. As the knife in the hands of the royal family, Kenny was appointed by the royal family. Specially deal with some unrevealed things for the royal family, such as assassination and cleaning. Advertisement. This time his target was a girl named Krista. Speaking of which, that kid should not be too young. And that black-haired kid, is he still alive? Stuffing out the cigarette in his hand, Kenny thought of Levi, who was also an accidental product. Kenny remembered the indifference in Levi's eyes when he met Levi in Wengdu Underground Street. And the calmness in the eyes of the little black-haired boy next to Levi that doesn't match his age. Drive. After a rest, Kenny Ackerman drove the carriage and set off again. In his carriage, 2 shiny black boxes with the size of heads looked eerie under the faint starlight. North of Sheena's wall. The north in August already has the characteristics of autumn. Like thick fog, a milky white fog shrouded the agricultural area, and the golden wheat could be faintly seen covering the vast land. Dewdrops hang on the weeds on the ridge of the field. Crystal clear, each one is like a glass bead. A grasshopper sucked the moisture off its legs with its mouth parts, and then jumped up from the ridge of the field. It wants to look for tender grass in another place. Caught it, what a big grasshopper. Krista carefully opened her white palm, looked at the huge grasshopper, and smiled happily. Her white skirt was half wet with dew. There are many grasshoppers that can be vaguely seen in a bamboo cage on the waist. Advertisement. Rista, morning exercise will start soon. Understood, come right away. Mikasa's voice came from the white mist, and when Krista heard it, she put the grasshopper into the bamboo cage on her waist. Then ran out. On the training ground, everyone has already started a day of morning exercises. Whether it is a rookie or an elite, daily morning exercises are the basic exercises that must be attended. Krista ran behind Mikasa. She has been in the hunter group for 3 months and has just adapted to the high-intensity training in the hunter group. In the past 3 months, she has become more confident than she was before. Why are you catching grasshoppers? It's a secret. Mikasa was running in the mist with the main force. She saw the bamboo basket with grasshoppers on Krista's waist and asked curiously. Hearing Mikasa's question, Krista ran forward with a mysterious face. In order to catch these grasshoppers, she got up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Within a few months, Mikasa and Krista, who were about the same age, became good friends. In addition to only talking to Lin Yan, Mikasa usually has another Krista. At noon, the milky white fog was lifted by the dazzling sun, revealing the golden ocean. In the golden wheat fields that can't be seen at a glance. Full ears of wheat are the best gifts for hardworking people. It seems that the harvest is not bad. Lin Yan stands on the ridge of the field. Advertisement. Looking at the wheat that was still a piece of wheat seedlings a few months ago, it has now become full ears of wheat. A faint smile appeared on his face. Although the hunter group's main income does not rely on these grains, who doesn't like to see such a bumper harvest in front of them? There are 3 poles in the sun. Everyone in the hunter group began to harvest wheat. It was the first time to plant food, and when everyone saw the wheat in front of them, the smiles on their faces never stopped from the very beginning. They grew up in Wengdu Underground Street and cherish everything in front of them. Krista looked around in the wheat field. Suddenly her eyes lit up and she ran towards a place. Big brother, this is for you. Lin Yan looked at the food box that Krista handed over, and after being puzzled, he opened it. Inside were charred worms. It can be vaguely seen that it is a grasshopper. It tastes pretty good. Hearing Lin Yan's comment, Krista smiled happily. It was Lin Yan who rescued her several times when she encountered difficulties, and she always wanted to thank Lin Yan. But because she is not valued by her family, she has nothing to give Lin Yan. A few days ago, Lin Yan occasionally heard that the grasshoppers in her hometown taste very good, so she went to catch the grasshoppers overnight. although she didn't know if grasshoppers could be eaten. In order to roast these grasshoppers, she was burned in several places on her hands. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 14%. Chapter 49. Premonition of Famine. Despair fills the world 1/4. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Russell. Big brother, there are so many birds in the sky. Lin Yan is tasting the charred grasshopper on the plate. He has always paid great respect to food. Hearing Krista's voice, Lin Yan raised his head, then froze in place. His physique has improved a lot, and his eyesight has long surpassed that of ordinary people. Lin Yan instantly recognized what it was. That thing was also on the plate in his hand. Called locusts. Looking at the locusts flying over in the distance, covering the sky and covering the sun, even though Lin Yan has seen a lot and knows a lot, cannot help but be shocked by the spectacular sight. On the horizon in the distance, it seemed as if a sandstorm had swept up. The black and dense locusts made one's scalp numb. Even if it was far away, Lin Yan could still hear the sound of the locusts' wings vibrating. Everyone, speed up the harvest. Seeing the locusts sweeping in the distance, Lin Yan knew that disaster was coming. But luckily, the wheat on the Hunter Group farm was almost harvested because the planting time was half a month earlier than that of the surrounding farms. In the surrounding farms, the wheat has just been filled with grout, and it is still blue. Without thinking, Lin Yan knew what these farms would face next. Chua 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 chua. Hearing Lin Yan's words, everyone began to speed up the harvesting. Quickly harvesting the last few pieces of wheat. Advertisement. It didn't take long for the last piece of wheat field to be harvested by everyone. Is this a locust? I thought it was a sparrow. After cutting off the last handful of wheat, Fran wiped his sweat. He reached out and caught a locust. It was the first time he had seen a locust the size of a sparrow. There were some locusts in the Hunter Group's farm before, and Frank also heard Lin Yan mention it. Said locusts are delicious. However, because of the small number, it has long been eaten by thousands of ducks on the farm. Fran wanted to get a few to try, but he gave up because there were too few. Now seeing the locust as big as a sparrow in his hand, Fran couldn't help but have the idea of trying. The members of the Hunter Group, under the leadership of Lin Yan, generally have the attribute of foodies. Fortunately, it's all over. Lin Yan breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the people who had already started to thresh the wheat. There are not many locusts entering the hunter's farm now, and the locusts seem to be not interested in the withered crops. The other side, on the yellow-green field. The air is filled with a grassy smell, which is the unique smell emitted by plants after they are destroyed. In the wheat field, a thick wild oat tree, growing wildly, looks much taller than the surrounding wheat. Stand out from the crowd. On its tender green stalks a bunch of oats has just grown. It looks verdant. As the breeze blew, a few fat, shiny locusts flapped their wings and fell from the sky. Advertisement. The locust opened its huge mouthparts, biting on the oat stalk, gnawing on it. Extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, the sturdy oats were eaten clean by locusts. And around the wild oats, the yellow-green wheat surrounding the wild oats has also been covered with locusts at this moment. Clusters of fat locusts hang from the wheat. It looks like locusts have buried the wheat in the ground. After a while, the locusts ate up the wheat. After eating one place, the locusts flew up again, looking for the next target. Looking around, there was just a yellow-green wheat field, but in a blink of an eye, there was no grass, and only the dark land was left. Bastard. Damn robber, give me back the food. Get out of here, get out of here. ... Around the fields, desperate farmers rushed into their fields. They held hoes and sickles in their hands, and waved them wildly, trying to drive away the locusts in front of them. But there were too many locusts, and as soon as they drove away one group, another group came over. In a blink of an eye, the grain in their fields was eaten up. The breath of despair, as the locusts continued to migrate, completely permeated. The screams of crying, covering all directions. The entire northern development area, which was originally a scene of a bumper harvest. Because of the sudden arrival of locusts, it became a Jedi. The green earth is like a green blanket covering the earth. It was completely uncovered and eaten away by the army of locusts, and in the end, only the pitch black land remained. Advertisement. 1 day later. After the dull thunder in the sky, pea-sized raindrops fell from the sky. The earth gradually becomes moist, and the stagnant water slowly accumulates. It didn't take long for it to converge into a stream and become a flood. Bark. A carriage was advancing rapidly on a muddy dirt road, after a sharp bend. Because the ground was slippery and muddy, the carriage slid out and nearly overturned, and finally hit a bare tree on the side of the road. Even the leaves are gone. Kenny Ackerman was sitting on the carriage, not paying any attention to the fact that the carriage almost overturned just now. After lighting a cigarette, Kenny looked at the bare woods in front of him, and slowly puffed out the clouds. This way, everywhere he saw was a mess destroyed by locusts. Where can I see the slightest bit of green? Drive. A carriage passed by Kenny, leaving deep ruts. As long as people guess, they can guess that the carriage is pulling heavy objects. Watching the passing carriage getting farther and farther away, Kenny returned to the carriage after smoking. Driving the carriage, he planned to go to a neighboring town to replenish some supplies. One day later, inside the dark underground space, a mouse crawled through the holes, sniffing its wet nose, and soon came to a place of light. Upgrade points from Attack on Titan. Report. 14%. Chapter 50. Preparations for leaving the city, Krista's goal 2 quarters. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Boom. A huge metal impact sounded, and the mouse that had just climbed to a barred window was scared by the sound and turned around and ran away. How about the food reserves? The underground granaries are already full, and our people are still collecting grain outside. There are things like moisture-proof rats here, you need to pay more attention. In a huge cellar, Isabel is holding a kerosene lamp and showing Lin Yan the way. While talking to Isabel, Lin Yan pushed open a huge iron door. This is one of the 3 granaries of the hunters. Since moving to the north, most of Lin Yan's money has been used to buy food. Money has no effect on Lin Yan. Only high-quality food can bring people a sense of security. Now there are 252 people in the hunter group. Among the food consumed every day, Lin Yan accounts for 1/10 of the food consumption. In other words, the amount of food Lin Yan now has can already be compared with 25 people. Moreover, the food intake of members of the hunter group is twice as large as that of ordinary people. So in fact Lin Yan can eat the food of 50 ordinary people in one meal. This huge consumption has always made Lin Yan feel a strong sense of crisis, so he has developed the habit of stockpiling food since he was a child. The 3 underground warehouses of the hunter group now store enough food for 252 people for 5 years. In addition, there are more than 3,000 ducks, more than 1,000 chickens, 10 cows, and hundreds of sheep in the hunter group farm. Advertisement. More than 60 horses. All kinds of things. After nearly a year, Lin Yan can be considered to have some background in the north. Is the boss really going to famine? Isabel followed Lin Yan. Looking at the mountains of wheat in front of her, she remembered what Lin Yan said before. When the wheat was harvested, Lin Yan judged that there would be a famine. But after several days, it seemed that everything was fine and there was no movement. At most half a month, it will explode. Tell Levi, send twice as many people to protect the food delivery team. In just 2 days, Lin Yan has turned nearly 70% of the goods and money in his hand into food. A lot of food is on the way back. This locust plague, as well as continuous torrential rains, not only the wheat, but 80% of the sweet potatoes in the field will also have a sharp drop in harvest. Most people have some food in their homes, but Lin Yan knows that this is just the calm before the food shortage. Therefore, the increase in food prices has become inevitable, and the currency will depreciate substantially. After inspecting the underground granary, Lin Yan came out from the ground. There was no rush to leave. After saying goodbye to Lin Yan, Isabel held an umbrella and disappeared into the rain. She has many things to do. 17-year-old Isabel is no longer the young girl she was before. On her body, the taste of maturity has become more and more obvious, and the former one has become an S. Advertisement. Boss, there seems to be something on my mind. Walking in the rain, Isabel turned to look at Lin Yan who was standing under the granary. Isabel noticed Lin Yan's brows. These days, there was a hint of worry. Growing up with Lin Yan, Isabel knows Lin Yan like few others. Although Lin Yan didn't say anything, Isabel could still hear some small movements from Lin Yan. You can tell that Lin Yan seems to be worried about something. On the side of the granary, Lin Yan frowned slightly as he looked at the continuous rain curtain on the eaves. That moment is getting closer and closer. Although from the original book, the time when Titan breaks the city is still early. But Lin Yan always has the feeling that maybe the time when Titan breaks the city will not be exactly the same as the original. This locust plague made Lin Yan realize the importance of preparation. Let's go out for a walk after the rainy season has passed. Lin Yan decided that after the rainy season, he would take a few core members outside the wall to practice. Simulation is of little use to everyone. The improvement of the strength of Levi and the others has reached a bottleneck. It is time for the hunter group to conduct Titan hunting training. After making a decision, Lin Yan frowned slightly. He is going to make some necessary preparations for this expedition. In torrential rain. Advertisement. A petite figure staggered and ran in the rain. It doesn't seem to care about the heavy rain in the sky at all. 40th lap. Krista, who was running in the rain, stopped. Her whole body was already wet by the rain. Run 40 laps. Krista felt her legs were burning like fire. She opened her small mouth slightly, leaning on a wall, panting. 1 day ago, Mikasa had been transferred to the core team because of his excellent performance in the training assessment. And Krista is still in the novice training camp, continuing basic training. Therefore, Krista wants to train hard and enter the core team early. This way, not only can I train with Mikasa, but I can also see Lin Yan every day. Krista, who is ignored by her family, likes to stay with Lin Yan very much. She still remembers the clear look in Lin Yan's eyes when she first met Lin Yan. No disgust, no indifference, calm and heartwarming. Slightly gasping for breath, feeling her physical strength regained a bit, Krista took advantage of the heavy rain and walked towards her manor. Inside the manor, greenery surrounds a huge castle with igloos. A group of servants beat the locusts on the green trees around the castle with bamboo poles in the heavy rain, regardless of the torrential rain in the sky. Celebrate the 7-day-long holiday of National Day and enjoy reading books. Recharge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity time, October 1st to October 7th. Advertisement.